Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can be healthy naturally. Now, our guest today is an author, Carolin Hauser-Carson. You can find out more about her wonderful, amazing work at womenintheflow.com. Carolin is a German-trained naturopathic doctor, a humanistic psychotherapy therapist, and a family constellations facilitator, and the author of the wonderful book, Blossom, 7 Steps to Sexual Healing, and the upcoming book, The Pleasure IQ. Welcome, Carolin Hauser-Carson.
Thanks for having me.
So, Carolin, sexual healing is not something that many people have the courage to talk about, much less engage in. What exactly is sexual healing?
That is a really good question. It's not what most people think. Most people think that in order to heal sexually, first of all, if you have been traumatized, it means that you have to go and relive and work through all the bad stuff that you have experienced. And so my definition of sexual healing, or the way I've helped myself, is to actually learn that it has much more to do with healing your nervous system and your energetic system. So to me, sexual healing has a lot to do with energy and your own energy and releasing negative energy, rather than, psychological work or mental work or forgiveness work or processing of, what happened.
I really love your definition of what is sexual healing. And I'm going to tell a story from my own work as a medical intuitive. I remember years ago, I worked with a young man who had been raped. Now, we all hear about women who get raped, and there's a lot of discussion with the Me Too women movement at the moment about these experiences happening to women. But nobody really talks about it happening to men. So the story was that there was a young man, and in the US, if as a practitioner, you even hear about something like this happening to anybody under the age of 18, you're required by law to report it to the police. So this young man was 18 at the time that I worked with him. And about 2 years previously, he had been waiting for his mother to pick him up. And he was jumped by 3 men. And when he came to me, the reason he came was he was referred by the school, and he had been working out and exercising so hard that he would pass out and an ambulance would have to come and pick him up. So he was obviously trying to be physically strong. Well, cutting to the chase about what you were saying is that part of what I did was I repaired the tears in his energy field. Because when we go through trauma, as I'm sure you're aware, it literally tears our energy field and creates literally holes in the energy field. And if you're listening, it's a law of physics that anytime there's a vertical current, electrical current, there's a magnetic field perpendicular to that. So when we have trauma, whether it's a sexual abuse or any other kind of trauma, it literally creates holes in the energy field. People become much more sensitive, and it messes with your energy in many, many ways.
Yeah.
So going back to your book, Blossom, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, so I'm from Germany. And I grew up in Germany. I came to the US in my mid-20s. And in my late teens, I came across books like Conversations with God and Deepak Chopra and so forth. And I always had this vision that I was going to be like them, but I had no idea, what I was going to write about or talk about. And my own healing journey was that I had had eating disorders very severely from 10 to in my late, actually my early 20s. And so I had been searching to help myself, and had found family constellations that way, and family constellations had helped heal me. So in my early 20s, because I was able to heal, I then started to spend my entire 20s on training, becoming a naturopathic doctor and humanistic psychotherapist. So to make a long story short, I spent my entire 20s healing myself. And so by the time I was 30, I thought I was done. And I knew how to help myself. I knew how to help people. I had gone through sexual abuse in my teenage years, and I had used that as some of the material that I was working through in my 20s. And then in my late 20s, I had my daughter. And with her turning 3 in my early 30s, memories of much earlier sexual abuse started to surface, and I was really thrown for a hoop, because here I was thinking I had done all this work, and then boom, this thing just came out of the blue. And not really, in hindsight, it wasn't really, I had known all along, and I had this feeling, but I just kept myself from knowing. And so it took me about 3 months of really being thrown and not knowing what to do, until I realized, well, with all the knowledge I have, all the training I've done, and at that point I had already helped a lot of people also, there must be a higher purpose. And so I was like, well, maybe this is the thing I'm meant to write a book about. And so before I then wrote the book, I actually took a group of women. I had started to learn about internet marketing, and I really wanted to build a business online. And so I had kind of built a small email list and a little tribe of people. And so I took some of them on the healing journey with me. And then out of that material and out of the things that worked, I created the book, basically.
That's wonderful. Now, Carolin, why is the Me Too movement just the beginning? And for our audience, the Me Too movement, what that is, it was started within the past year, I believe, where people would put on their social media timeline, Me Too, and it would indicate that they too had been the experiencer of some degree of sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So why is the Me Too movement just the beginning?
Because like what we talked about, real healing comes from actually addressing your physicality and your nervous system and your energetic system. And what I'm seeing now with the Me Too movement is a lot of finger pointing. And while it's great for people to actually get out of the shame and guilt are very low vibrational frequencies, which you probably know, right? So it's great that people are getting out of the shame and guilt and having the courage to say, hey, this happened to me. But just because they're able to say that, it doesn't repair the damage that has been done.
Right. Now, what is your take on catharsis or cathartic healing?
It can feel really good in the moment. So it can feel really good to finally get angry and to, because anger makes you feel more powerful than depression or defeatedness or even apathy. But in terms of healing your nervous system and your energetic system, and also your spirit and your soul, again, it doesn't really bring real healing. It can get you out of the apathy of not doing anything or feeling like you're completely worthless. But it's just one first step up on the ladder to true healing. And I think a lot of people don't know this, because when I went to my training, it was really highly advocated that we would get our emotions out, and we had like dummy puppets for our parents, and we got to hit them and strangle them, and I remember I would feel really good the day after, but then nothing had changed. So yeah, it's not an effective healing tool, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Strangling your parents really doesn't solve anything, literally or metaphorically.
Yes.
What is the most crucial first step you feel when it comes to healing from sexual abuse?
It is to realize that you're not a victim, even though it feels like, somebody did this to you. And yes, somebody did this to you, and whatever they did wasn't right. But at the same time, they did not break you, and this thing didn't break you. And the problem with sexual abuse survivors, and a lot of people that live with sexual abuse survivors or have had contact, it's a very, very touchy subject. And so oftentimes when I bring this up and I say, you need to get out of this victim state, what they think I'm saying is that I say that it's their fault, right? A lot of people think, well, if it's not if it's not the guy's fault or the person that did it to me, whose fault is it then? Is it my fault? Then I'm really interested in elevating the conversation out of this whose fault it is, because it doesn't bring you anywhere, right? So above, it's, let's just say it's nobody's fault. It happened for a reason. What can you do now? Right? So getting out of victim mentality, not stepping into self-blame, but into a space where, okay, this happened, and what can I do now?
I really appreciate that you're saying that, Carolyn, because, when I'm working and doing healing work in my practice as a medical intuitive, one of the things I look at for are the archetypes that are holding people back. And a good way to think of an archetype is who's got the body, what point of view are you speaking from? And when you're speaking from victim, whether you're talking about sexual abuse or anything else that happened, you are not in your power. And you got to get into your power in order to heal, and you have to take responsibility. And like you said, that doesn't mean that you wanted to be sexually abused, right? But what it means, as you say, is that you're still whole. You're not broken. You still have a wholeness that you can experience. Now, how can survivors stop feeling damaged or broken by abuse?
Doing exactly what we just talked about. And I always like to share my story. And some people think I'm crazy and I'm outrageous for saying these things. And so for everybody listening, and if you might, if you're listening and you want to tell this to somebody who has been sexually abused, just know that this is my truth. And that's why I'm sharing it. And somebody else might be very triggered by it. So my own truth is that now that I have done this work, I do know actually that my soul intended to have these experiences because I really wanted to learn about power. I wanted to learn what it meant to be a powerful co-creator, and therefore I had to give my power away first to realize how I do that, right? So that I could learn how to reclaim my power also.
Yeah. And, you bring up something really interesting because, we give our power away in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Not just if sexual abuse happens, we let someone else make the decision. We let someone else be in charge of our life, right? Especially when you work in the corporate world. I've never worked in the corporate world, luckily. But I think a lot of people that work in the corporate world, you feel like you have to do whatever, say yes to things that you might not want to do. It's the same in sexual abuse. You say yes to something you really don't want to do just because you're afraid for your survival. Yeah. So we can look and ask ourselves all kinds of questions about where do I give my power away? And how can I take my power back? Because the more that you take your power back, the more you're in the present moment, and the more your energy is in the present, the more powerful you are.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it sounds very abstract. Okay, how do I take my power back? Because I don't think I'm giving it away. I think people just, I think I don't have a choice, and I think people just do what they do. And, I'm just a nice person. I'm not going to be a nasty person. Just, so there's a lot of confusion what it actually means to have boundaries and to be in your power. And so for me, and what I teach people is that, we don't have power over anything outside of ourselves. We don't have power over other people, circumstances, whatsoever. What we do have power over is our own energetic state of being. And so all the work that I do focuses on giving people tools so they can help themselves feel as good as possible. Because when you do, your brain is in a relaxed state. And when your brain is in a relaxed state, you have access to your creativity, your resourcefulness, connection. Basically, you have a much bigger arsenal of solutions than when you are in fear and anxiety, stressed out, and so forth. So essentially your power comes from learning to help yourself with your biochemistry so that you can function optimally. Because the opportunities and the ways to make things easy for you, they're always around you. We just don't see them because we're oftentimes too stressed. Like literally our brain will not allow us to see them because we're too stressed out and too much in a survival mode.
So, Carolin, I wonder if you happen to know any statistics about how many women experience sexual abuse in their lifetime. I think I've read somewhere that throughout a lifetime, the average woman, or 1 out of 3 women, will experience some form of sexual abuse. So, and I think it's important to talk about that, because so many times we think, I did something wrong or I'm unique, rather than.
That's pretty much almost everybody.
Yeah, pretty much almost everybody. What is your understanding of the statistics on sexual abuse?
I also have seen the numbers 1 in 3, and sometimes I wonder, in other countries where, how do they even keep track? I think in some other countries the numbers are much higher, and it's, and the abuse is more atrocious, obviously, than in some other countries. So I believe they're higher, and for men it's 1 out in 6, or 1 in 7, and I think that number is even more skewed because I think men talk even less about it when it happens to them than women, right? And also a lot of people don't talk about it. So if 1 out of 3 is the people that actually talked about it, or 1 out of 6, how many people don't talk about it or aren't even asked?
So if you're in the audience and you have experienced this in your lifetime, first of all, understand that this is a very common experience to go through, both as a man and as a woman. And secondly, realize that you can heal from that. And that's what Carolin Hauser-Carson's new book, Blossom, is about. So anyway, very common. What do you feel is one of the main blocks to healing?
One of the main blocks is really the shame and the guilt that people carry, and the thinking that, nobody else will understand them and they're the only one, and they're damaged by it forever, and all those kinds of very negative thoughts, when that is absolutely not true, right? If you could step out the shame and the guilt, then you can take the responsibility. If you're stuck in shame and guilt, you'll never be able to take the step and say, okay, this happened, and now what I do, because you'll just be stuck in either blaming yourself or the other person forever.
Yeah. And, I can relate. I had an experience when I was about 16. Mm-hmm. And I remember at the time feeling shame and guilt. And I remember I was someplace where maybe I shouldn't have been, and I didn't tell anybody about it. So at the time, I really didn't talk about it. I was just like, oh my goodness, I made a mistake. How can we move beyond that shame and guilt to go into the healing that we all need?
It's, really for you, probably in your own journey, you can also see how it probably helped you learn something about yourself and grow in hindsight, right? So what I think is really helpful to know, that any experience we have in life is meant for us to have. We didn't do anything to deserve it or create it. We didn't do anything wrong. It was really, and in my case, I know that I planted these things for me to go through even, right? So I don't know if you as a listener can go that far, but just know that it's a good reason, and a reason that is a benefit to you. It's not to destroy you, it's to benefit you, and to start looking for what that benefit is, right? Whether it made you stronger, whether you saw how you treat yourself, right? In your case, you totally went into just self-blame and just assumed that it was your fault because you went into the wrong location, right? So it is really, it's asking us to learn to love ourselves and to grow.
Yeah, and you bring up a subject that I'm very big on, which is compassion for ourselves.
Yeah.
And wherever you are in your process, maybe you're listening to this program and something just happened to you and you're trying to make sense of it, or something happened 20 years ago and you still haven't been able to make sense of it. Yeah. So just realize that whatever stage you're at, you can heal, but it doesn't help to blame yourself, and it doesn't help to be ashamed. and knowing that so many other people go through this is helpful. Now, Carolin, you say that sexual abuse is not just a psychological problem. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Mm-hmm. And you touched on this in the beginning. The way I explain it is that imagine that your body is a house, or it's your house that you live in. It's the house that houses our spirit and our soul while we're on this earth. And so when a house gets struck by lightning, everything, all the circuits melt, circuits break or might completely break. And after that, the energy in the house, the circuits, it just doesn't flow anymore. And the appliances might not work. Nothing in the house will work the way it worked before because parts might have been burned, melted, and so forth. So when trauma happens, it's basically a huge amount of energy that bombards or bounces into your system. And it's just the same as the lightning with the house. And so after the traumatic event has happened, and it's not just for sexual trauma, it could be for any trauma. And it could also be that it was just, ongoing and over time. It doesn't have to be like one impact. It could also be slowly over time, accumulating like a slow burn. The lines in your body, the circuitry in your body doesn't work anymore. And so your power lines are down. And the beautiful thing though about this is that you are in your body, and you, because you are in your body, can heal and mend these parts that have been disconnected. And literally, I imagine the nervous system like melted and shrunk together and ripped apart. And like you were talking about the energetic holes, right? It's not an invisible thing. It's actually physically in your nervous system happening. I think a lot of people say, when they hear energy, they think it's like woohoo and it's out there. And no, it's like measurable energy, like electricity. And there is circuits in our body and energy fields and that make us work and function.
So for our audience, I'm going to explain a little bit more about what Carolin's talking about. So again, it's a law of physics that anytime there's a vertical electrical current, there's a magnetic field to that. Now there's layers of this field. So if I'm doing a medical intuitive reading, I read the physical body, the energetic body, which includes your chakras, your acupuncture system, and the breath, the emotional body, which is the largest part of you, and emotions can shut down anything, the mental body, which includes your thoughts and beliefs, and then finally your spiritual body. So when you have abuse, like Carolin is talking about, these layers are literally ripped. Your chakras can be ripped. And a trained energy healer can literally patch the holes in your energy field. And I started the program by talking about that young man who I helped. And I remember patching the holes in his field. And he said, I know you know that you helped me. He said, you had no idea how much you helped me. So just know that if you've experienced trauma that like this, that an energy healer can patch the holes in your field and help repair your chakras so that your energetic system can function more normally. And what that's going to feel like is you're going to be calmer, you're going to be more at peace with yourself, it's going to feel easier for you to be in your body. Now, Carolin, how can people heal their nervous system? Because again, when you have trauma, what in my experience is that you get stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. So you have two sides of your nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is the part that relaxes. So whenever we have trauma, we get stuck in that sympathetic. So what's your experience? How do you help people heal their nervous system?
That's partly what the book is about. It's a 7-step process. But in essence, it's really about learning to be in your body, and then learning to, instead of being in the emotion, like, let's say you get angry, right? You're like, I'm angry. Instead of being angry, being able to shift and using your body as a sensing instrument and sensing what this emotion feels like as a sensation in your body, right? So it might feel like a fire in your stomach. It might feel like a knot in your throat. It's different every time and different for everybody. But when you're focusing on these sensations, the sensations that you're having are basically the energy that got stuck in your house, in your system, in your wiring system. And so in the beginning, this can be hard because what often happens for trauma survivors is that they're not in their body, right? So there's some other steps beforehand that you might need to take to be able to be in your body and sense this. But once you can do that, it's very simple, and you can do it every day. You don't have to go to therapy. You don't have to know them. You don't have to have memories. You don't have to relive the trauma. You don't have to even relive the emotions, because all you want is just the sensation. And it can become just a daily practice. And you can work with little triggers. It doesn't have to be big triggers.
I really love that you're saying this, Carolyn, because what I find is that people go into addictions, overeating, drinking, drugging, overworking, overexercising, shopping, all these forms of addictions, legal and illegal, taking too many drugs, legal and illegal, because they're not allowing themselves to just simply feel the energy of their emotions.
Yeah, we're too afraid of the pain. We think the pain is going to kill us, when in essence, that will kill us, because we're going to do all these things, right? We overeat, we overdrink, we wreck our emotions, we wreck our relationships, we wreck our health. And it's all because we're so afraid of the pain. And in essence, when you can actually just be with the sensation of the emotion, it's not scary.
I love that you're explaining that, because again, I feel that as a practitioner, that mental emotional health, when you're mentally emotionally healthy, that doesn't mean you're never going to be sad, you're never going to be anxious, never going to be depressed. You feel all of it.
Yeah.
And even if you just even let go of the story about it and just look at it as energy and sensation, and look at it literally as energy and sensation, rather than the story that you're telling yourself about that.
Yeah. And actually, if people want to go to my website, thewomenintheflow.com, the free gift that I'm giving on that website teaches them the exact process, because in my experience, just knowing basically I call this tool a tool that helps you transmute negative energy, your own negative energy, into positive energy. And in order to really have everything that you want in life and live the dream life, so to speak, all that's required is just you upgrading your vibration, becoming of a high vibrational being. And for me, I can just tell, and I don't want to brag, but using that tool that I'm giving away on my website is responsible for me going from being bankrupt, going through divorce, having burnout and chronic fatigue stage 4, so really bad. I couldn't get off the couch at all, and I had 2 small children, so it was really bad. Within a very short amount of time, having served over 5,000 people, having been able to buy a house in the Caribbean, having met my divine partner and soulmate. So it will change everything in your life in all levels when you change your vibration.
So that's a free gift for our audience at womenintheflow.com. Now, you bring up a really important point that a lot of people don't make the connection about, which is when we stay stuck in the trauma, and when our nervous system stays stuck in the sympathetic, and you can't get into a balanced nervous system state where you can't work, relax. When you're stuck in the trauma, it literally exhausts you. And so it's very common for people who have had trauma to end up with severe exhaustion, right?
Yes. Yep.
And how did you get out of the exhaustion that you experienced following the trauma?
Well, I really had a wake-up moment. One night, my ex-husband, or my husband at the time, came home, and I had to spend another day on the couch not being able to take care of the children. And I said to him, I cannot do this anymore. I literally felt like I was going to die. I had zero energy. And he just said, not thinking anything, well, you wanted to be a mother, which was true, And so when he said that, what I heard probably was, well, you just got to sacrifice yourself completely or something. So with him saying that, it just snapped me out of my body. And it looked like a panic attack. So my body was on the floor, hyperventilating basically, but I was under the ceiling looking down at my body, and my kids were on top of me and crying, and it was very confusing. And so as I was hovering under the ceiling, a voice said to me, your work isn't done. And I was sent back into my body. And then for 5 days, I experienced a state of complete harmony, so, which was amazing, you know. I was like, oh, and then it ended. But luckily, I have the memory of you know, of it. And also during those 5 days, I could literally see how I allowed negativity into my field. It was a very musical experience. So anytime a negative thought or something negative wanted to enter my field, it literally sounded like an orchestra out of tune. So immediately I would just not go there. Right. So I learned about based the necessity of keeping my energy in a high vibrational state in what I call like a non-resistant space where you're in harmony. And then also I learned, or the magic that was going on during that 5 days was that anytime I became aware of a desire, let's say I wanted a lemon or I needed anything, you know, anytime I became aware of something I needed, it was right there. There was no gap between me wanting something and the fulfillment of it. Right. So I learned that when we can be honest about, or when we can just let the desires that are natural in our soul arise and not try to manipulate or not try to go into doing and controlling it, everything is actually provided for us. And so what that taught me was the necessity to really learn to make decisions based on what felt right and not needing to know too much about everything. I'm a control freak, so I know most people that have gone through trauma are a little bit like anxious and controlling. So it requires to be okay with just knowing the next step. It's almost like the universe leaves breadcrumbs, and you just have to learn to be trusting and okay with just knowing what to do to get to the next breadcrumb, basically. And you do that by making decisions that feel good to you and right to you, saying yes to the things you really want to say yes to. Right? That's huge for almost everybody, because this is how we get our power back. We're the ones that say yes to the things we don't want to, and we think sometimes people force us. And there might be situations where, you know, somebody's holding a gun to your head or something, but most of the time, people aren't. You know, we think we're in danger. We think we don't have a choice, but we always do.
So, Carolin, if a woman or a man, for that sake, has experienced sexual abuse, how can we feel safe with the opposite sex again?
It starts by learning to help yourself and your own nervous system, because when you can when you can balance your nervous system, so a balanced nervous system is an experience of peace. When you're at peace, you know your nervous system is in balance. When you're in a peaceful state, you can also learn to hear your intuition, and your intuition will never lead you wrong or stray. And so when that happens, you can start cultivating that, and then you can feel safe. Right? You can feel safe because you know who to listen to and what to listen to and how to keep yourself safe.
Now, I want to say for our audience, there's some really simple things that you can do to balance your nervous system. And that's practice yoga, tai chi, and qigong. These forms of exercise are unique in that they are designed to balance your energy system, to clear your field, to heal your chakras. And, you know, whatever kind of yoga or tai chi or qigong you practice, find something that feels good to you, that helps you feel comfortable in your body. And that's going to be really helpful. Now, Carolin, what do you think makes a woman susceptible to sexual abuse?
Being that we're the weaker gender, you know, we think that we have to say yes to things for our survival, or it's not even consciously. I don't even want to say we think. It's so deeply ingrained that we just say yes to anything when we don't even stop and think about it. And so I think that's why women are more susceptible. I think there's many situations where we could have actually said no, or we could have I think there's actually many situations where the guy didn't even know that he did something that you didn't want it, you know? I mean, I've been in those situations where I really didn't want, you know, to have intercourse or something. And I just didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem prude, or I didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Yeah. You know, so I think just because we have this deep programming for needing to, or thinking that we have to sacrifice ourselves so we're protected, or that our survival is protected, that makes us more susceptible.
So Carolin Hauser-Carson, your book, Blossom, 7 Steps to Sexual Healing, talks about 7 steps. So what are the 7 steps to sexual healing?
The first step is really bringing your mind on board. And when I say mind, I mean that part of you that is connected to the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, your ego, the protective part of you. And that part wants to keep us always safe. And safe to the subconscious, or to this part, means known. So the status quo is safe, which means it makes it really hard to change anything. And so the first step is about helping that part to relax and understand, so that you can actually create change, because otherwise the resistance will be so big that it will see, the anxiety or whatever it will produce, it will be too big for you to make any kind of changes. And then the second step has to do with landing in yourself and in your own body, so that you can start getting acquainted to what emotions actually feel like. You're learning to listen to yourself. You're learning to make friends with your inner child, because, we have learned very early on to disconnect from our emotions. And there's a lot of healing. Our inner child is, in my case, I was very upset that I wouldn't listen to the emotions and that I wasn't allowed to have emotions, right? And then the third step is learning to distinguish between the voices in your head and your intuition, because like I said, your intuition will always guide you in the right direction. And you can only hear it when you're in your body. So it's really important to first learn to be comfortable and allow yourself to feel and be in your body. Being in your body has to do with feeling and sensing. We experience life through our senses. And life can be super beautiful because we have a body that has senses. A lot of times we have cut ourselves off as abuse survivors. And then the fourth step has to do with BLO, seeing with the eyes of truth. Yes. Reframing and really seeing the gift. We talked about that a lot today, so that you can step into your power and out of the victim relationship. And then the fifth step is stretch beyond your limits. That is actual integration, where I teach the actual integration tool or technique, because by that time you have learned to be in your body, you've learned to make friends, you've learned to start using your sensing mechanisms to hear your intuition. And as a side note, the good thing about being an abuse survivor, you have developed tremendous intuition and spiritual gifts, probably, that you're cutting yourself off from right now too. So while you're doing this work, you can start embracing your sensitivity and all the gifts that you might have developed. For me, one of the gifts that I have, because this happened to me, I'm super intuitive, right? And I'm assuming that that's the same for a lot of people that went through similar situations, because you always had to kind of think ahead, and especially if the abuse went on for, over time, and it was not just a one-time event. Then the sixth step has to do with owning all of who you are. So because I come from family constellations, and family constellations do work a lot with the feminine and the masculine lineage, to me, you can't be at peace or in a harmonious state unless you have really cleaned up your relationship with your parents, and then also the relationship of the feminine and masculine within yourselves. And this, this is for everybody. For somebody who hasn't even gone through abuse, we all have the wounded and the wounded feminine and the wounded masculine inside ourselves. And if we want to be empowered and really strong, those, in my opinion, those two energies have to come into wholeness. And then the last step, is see the world and your beloved in wholeness. Is really about taking what you have learned into the world, into relationship, knowing how to relate, and knowing how you can use your relationship as a laboratory to help you keep growing, which that's the fun part.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because it's my experience that you are already whole. And what I mean by that, you're not broken. You have access to everything that you need in order to move forward in life.
Yes.
Because, and the reason I know that, I don't think it, I know it, is because you're a soul. You're
exactly
a human experience. Now, let's go back and talk about, because you touched on the gifts that people develop, through surviving through these things. So in working with people of all kinds, and that's my experience as well, is that people who've suffered from abuse and survived abuse have developed phenomenal survival skills, which you can then use to survive other experiences in life. I think even they did a study of survivors of the Holocaust, and they end up, being pretty healthy people, living long lives because they develop these talents. So
and resiliency, probably.
So share with us, for our audience, what specific skills, when you're working with clients who are survivors of sexual abuse, what specific skills and talents do you see that they have developed, even unconsciously?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually like clairvoyance or, any clairaudience, clairsentience, that type of, those types of like sixth sense kind of things, supernatural, metaphysical kind of talents and gifts, intuitive.
Yeah, so they're more in touch with their soul because their soul helped them literally live through that experience.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. What I find is a lot of people who've had abuse, it's very easy for them to go out of the body.
Yeah, which is a problem when we're here on Earth, trying to live here and be here and make money and all those things. Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want to learn how to get back into your body and feel comfortable in your body and realize that your body is your home in this life.
Yeah. Right? And that's exactly what Blossom actually does. That's, that's the intention for Blossom.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Carolin Hauser-Carson, any final thoughts for our audience?
The most important thing that I want people to take is always to know that, and I said this before, that your power doesn't come, we don't have power over other things, other people and so forth. You have power over your own energy and how you feel. So make that your focus. Make learning about your energy system, how to help yourself to become more high vibrational, and focusing on learning how you can allow yourself to feel as good as you can. Make that the priority, because that is where your power lies.
I couldn't agree more. And that starts by appreciating where you are in this moment. Even if you don't feel that you're fully healed from what has happened to you. And I had a guest on the program who talked about the difference between gratitude and appreciation. And he said, when you're grateful, you're comparing to the past. Like, oh, thank God, I'm not there anymore. And appreciation is really about being in the moment and where you are in this time. So you've been listening to Carolin Hauser-Carson. Carolin is the author of the book Blossom: 7 Steps to Sexual Healing, and the upcoming book, The Pleasure IQ. You can find out more about her and her work at womenintheflow.com. This is the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter so you can find out even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. And remember, when you have the courage to let go of the shame and the guilt from sexual abuse, you are going to heal yourself at very, very profound levels and reclaim your energy and let go of your self-image as a victim. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.